Want to be fast around the Goodwood Motor Circuit, impress your mates and maybe win a few races? Keep watching. I'm Will Egby, a former racing driver, and I'm going to give you an insight in how to be fast, smooth and consistent around the track. I'll tell you about the differences with a high and low powered car and also with a high and low grip car, so you're ready to go no matter what. I'll talk you through corner by corner, show you on the track map and with onboard footage too. By the end of the video, you will be race ready at Goodwood. Without further ado, on with the video. The first thing you'll do, of course, is come out the pit lane and join the track just before turn 1, Madgwick. It's important to be cautious on your first lap because it's a very long corner and it's easy to wash wide because there's some undulations as you go around. In the normal way, of course, you'll be coming down the start-finish straight and approaching it on your normal racing line. The key things for Madgwick is that it is a fast and flowing corner. At no point in it are you going to be stabbing the brakes, stabbing the throttle. Everything is going to be a blend of the pedals and steering, ensuring that the car stays balanced and you exit with a good speed, because the importance of this corner is not being fast around it, but it is being fast up this straight, because you should be flat out all the way from this point to that point. So you will of course be approaching it nice and wide out on this side of the track. This corner has two main apexes. One about here and the second late on about there. Now in a low grip car or a road car, what you're likely to be doing is coming in and braking in a fairly straight line towards that first apex so you can get good stopping power and slow the car down. You'll then push on wide whilst you're still braking. As you ease off the brakes and wind on the steering, you'll sort of V off the corner and come back at that second apex so you can fire down that straight. In a low grip car, you're more likely to turn, brake in a straight line, trail brake in and get your turning done at one point so you can accelerate quickly down the main straight in more of that V type shape. Key, smoothness, carry the speed, get to that curve, let it wash past and then get back to that curve. In a higher grip car, the corner's going to have more of a constant radius because you can have more lateral load. The second apex here is the much more important one, so this is going to be your focal point for the corner. You're going to give this first apex a bit more breathing room, so you want to come wider, let it breathe and then slowly tighten up to that second apex. That allows you to carry the speed whilst also, when you get to this point, being able to unwind the steering as early as possible so that you can drive forward out of the corner rather than around it. Another important thing to note about Madgwick is that at this second apex there is a bit of a crest, so that means your angle of approach to that crest is even more important. If you're coming at it from a tighter angle and you've still got a lot of steering lock on at that point, you're going to wash wide and not drive down the straight. That's why it's important that you've really got most of your turning done by that point and you're unwinding the steering so you don't induce a slide as the car goes light coming off the crest. The next corner you will get to is Fordwater. Now this is more of a high-speed kink than a full-on corner. For me, in my GR Yaris, it was flat out fairly early on, but in higher power, faster road cars, especially high power, low grip, you might end up having to lift.
This car in front, he does not think that corner's flat out. Maybe he could do with some driver coaching from me. Product placement right there, boom, see how I did that, smooth, right?
Now the main challenge with this corner comes from the elevation change. At the apex point, here, that's the highest point. So you've got your most grip leading up to the corner here. Then on the exit where the crest falls away, which is in this sort of zone, you lose grip. So again, same principle as the first corner, which is get your turning done before you lose grip there. Because if you've still winding lock on and it recompresses at this point where the dip ends, you're going to create a slide and that's not the fastest way around the track. But it does look cool. So that means if you're in a car that requires a lift, you want to be doing your lift early on in this sort of area. Another important thing to note is that the corner is close to flat out, so all you're really doing with your lift is it's less about taking the speed off and more about the weight transfer to the front to get the nose tucked into the apex. This means that a lift like this serves no purpose other than unsettling the car. What you should be doing is easing off the power and easing back on, and as you do that you are easing on the steering and easing back off. That means the car is settled, you're not going to induce a slide, and smoothness, as I mentioned, is extra important around this corner because of these elevation changes. In between Fordwater and this right hand turn here, it's not a straight line. So what I found myself doing was not following the shape of the outside of the track there, because that means that when you're braking, and it is quite a heavy braking zone, you're braking and turning, and that is of course not the most efficient way of taking speed off of the car. So what I was doing, and I believe is the quickest way, whether you're in a high grip car, low grip car, high speed, anything, this is the best way of doing it, is until your turning point there, where you start braking there, don't follow the curve of the track, but just brake in a straight line. Cut it off, shorter distance, more productive braking, faster. So here we're getting to our first sequence of corners. By that I mean one corner leading into the next, and they both influence each other massively. And you guessed it, the complication of this section is the elevation changes. So first I'll mark them up and show you where they are. From about here to here, there are no real elevation changes, but it's on the exit of the left-hander where it starts to fall away. You'll notice that on the exit of that corner, it falls away once from the apex to there, and then flattens off, and then falls away again and flattens off from that point to about that point. Now that is very important, because what that means is coming out of the left-hander, you have to hold it tighter than you would expect, because you are going to push wide on the exit. I've talked much more about the left-hander than I have the right-hander, and that is because the right is simply a setup for the left. We don't majorly care about it, and it's not what's going to gain you the time. You're going to gain it around this much trickier left-hander that leads onto a straight where you're on the power for much longer. So let's bring it back to where we were, up here. Now in a different colour pen, I'm going to mark up the key points. Of course, you have the apex of the right, and like I say, now the most important thing to do is make sure that you're setting it up for the left. So rather than letting it wash through the right, so you're going right and then flicking left, what you actually want to do is come back to this point, and you'll see the little tarmac strip on the right, which is where I was braking and then turning in. And then your other focal points are the apex of the left, later than you would expect of course, to allow for it to wash, and then there, where you're going to wash out to, but you're going to be aiming, like I say, tighter than you would expect. You'll get the hang of it after a few laps. So you've done your braking into here in a straight line, and you've got the car slowed down. Now you're easing off the brakes and winding on the steering, trail braking in, loading up the front of the car, giving the front of the car grip in order to make it to that apex. Now you're going to wash slightly past the apex, which is fine. You don't want to stick rigidly to this inside line. You've got to give the right some speed, some focus. So you can let it wash slightly before bringing it back to that point.
You want to make sure you hold it over to the right so you can fire at the left, because you lose traction on the exit of the left where it goes down.
Now at that point, you should be done with the right, finished, forget it ever happened, and you'll be having a quick brake into the left. For me, I was taking it over to the right hand side of the track, braking for maybe 5 meters in a straight line before the left. And because I was in quite a soft suspensioned road car, this neutralised the car and stopped it flicking from right to left and creating a slide. You need to be extra careful of inducing a slide as well at this point, because any slide you create between here and here is going to be amplified when the track falls away from you in that zone. You've done your braking here, You've slowed down the car however much you need to, whether you're in a high grip car, low grip car, you're going to need to take some speed off through that left. So you're now turning in to this apex point and you're making sure you're tight and pointed down the road. At the apex, that's when you're doing most of your turning, and then from that point forward, you should be unwinding the steering. If you find yourself holding the steering in that position or turning even more as the track falls away, it means you've carried too much speed in or you've taken too early an apex. So next lap, think about it, work on it and keep going. If you've done everything right to that point, the exit phase should fall into place. Because you lose grip on the exit, there's nothing really you can do other than modulate the power, unwind the steering and be as smooth as possible. Now you're bringing the car slowly over to the left hand side of the track there for Lavant corner or Lavant corner. I don't know how to say it. Let me know in the comments. And if you're enjoying the video so far, please like and subscribe to see more content just like this. So you've made it over to this point and there isn't a lot of time to do so, but just make sure you do it before you get to the braking point. Now this is another corner where the entry mid-corner speed isn't really the focus, because if you look, all of this is flat out in any car. So if you're going in too hard there, you might gain 0.2 maybe, but you're going to immediately lose 0.6 down this straight. So again, think about this point, not this point. You'll notice that this corner is tightest here at your main apex point, and then it goes straight for a period and then tightens up again. So for this corner, there is likely to be a big difference between high and low grip cars. This is because it's a high lateral load corner and that load is for a long time. So your apex point is pretty obvious, it's the same for every car. But it's your angle of approach to this point that's going to change. So first, a lower grip car. You're going to be braking in deeper to have a later swing at the apex point. What I found out in a lower grip car is that where I was running out of track was actually not this point, but this point here after that second kink at the exit. So what this means is that I give the edge of the track some breathing room there, so I don't run it all the way wide, I give it some breathing room so that when I come back to this sort of apex point, which I was giving a bit of breathing room, so the whole corner is just about unwinding the steering as much as you can to get that drive. So as I bring it back, I was actually exiting to that point. I hope that makes sense. If you don't understand anything we've gone through, rewind, watch it again, or drop me a message in the comments. So now in a higher grip car, apex point, the same, but maybe you're able to go in harder and turn in a bit earlier. Carry more speed at this point and run wider at that point. Like I say, your focus for this corner is to have the highest speed when you get to say this point, when the corner is over and when you're trying to get all the way down this long straight. In a lower grip car, and for me, that meant being slightly tighter there so that I can put the power down in a straight line to that point. Whereas in a higher grip car, it's more about carrying that mid-corner speed. Now, when I say higher grip, I mean either a very high grip road car, say dry day, Trofeo Rs, that kind of thing, or of course a slick. In your high grip car, you're going to be going in harder, faster, washing wider at that point, and letting the car run probably along that outside edge. So you're going to have lock on for longer, but because you can put that power down, you're just going to hold that constant radius with the steering so that you can be the fastest possible speed when the corner is done at that point. But again, like I said with turn 1 Madgwick, the focus is the long straights that follow the corners.
The key things to focus on at this track are your exits, as with a lot of tracks, but there's not a lot of sequences here. So you've got to make sure that you're prioritising the exit for the big straight that is inevitably coming up.
The Lavant straight has a little kink there. It's no concern, no need to lift. Your focus for that kink is to be as gentle and use as little lock as possible so as not to scrub off speed and to do the shortest route possible. So, Woodcote, a very famous corner, a massive overtaking opportunity, and you're nearly done with your lap. The track map doesn't show this majorly well, but you'll see it on the onboard footage, is that this corner has sort of two parts as well. You've got the main corner here, but there's also a slight right kink before that, so this corner is actually a very progressive one. There's a long braking zone from, say, here to your apex point, of course, trail braking in, loading up the car, but what you'll find, and you can see the track opens up on your left, is you're actually steering from way back here, because you're coming down the straight like so, and then because of this kink, you're actually winding on lock all the way there.
I'm now easing off the brakes as I wind on the steering and then feed on the power. It's a very progressive corner, that.
So you're going to be least amount of lock, hardest on the brakes, taking off the most speed, and then after that you're easing off the brakes as you load up the car and wind on the lock to the apex point. This is an incredibly progressive corner and one that rewards smoothness and patience. As for the exit, if you've done the first phase right and you've got to the apex and slowed it down to a sufficient speed, all you've got to do is feed on the power. It's fairly flat and a simple corner to exit. Of course, Woodcote sets you up naturally for this corner as you wash to the left-hand side of the track, which is where you want to be to open up the chicane. One thing you'll notice is that the entry, so the right-hander, is actually fairly fast, but it's the left that's really the pinch point. So what this means is, once again, you guessed it, the right is all about the left, and the left is all about the straight. So really, what you're doing at this point, you only care about because of what you're doing there. Another thing you'll find with the corner is that the exit seems to come up on you quite quickly, which is another reason why you need to hold the car to the right hand side of the track before you sort of fire at the left. So it should be nice and progressive as you brake and turn into the right, and then you flick at the left. Obviously smooth, I'm overemphasizing, but you flick at the left so you can get on the power as early as possible to fly down that straight. So you're of course turning in approximately here, and you want to get as close as possible to that barrier on the right. Because you have to do that sort of fire at the left, as I call it, and you're transitioning from right to left quickly. Now, if you remember early on, I said at St Mary's, I found in a lower grip car, I was doing the right, straightening the wheel, braking, and then doing the left. So treating them sort of separately. In a high grip car, of course, that's more flowing because there's less chance of the rear end stepping out on you. But here, you can't do that. You are going straight from the right into the left, and that can induce a slide. So be careful of that. On your first few laps, what I'd recommend doing is giving that left-hand barrier a bit more of a breather. So into the right is again a progressive corner. You're not really going to be stamping on the brakes and going in super hard. What you want to do is make sure that you set the car stable and ready to go at the left. So what you need to do is be smooth on the brakes as you come through the right, smooth on the brakes, smooth on the steering. So I was finding I'm not coming into the corner and then stamping on the brakes, winding on the lock, flicking it in. That won't work. It's going to induce the slide.
Take the speed off, ease it into the right and the left. Do not get a slide on through the right, because you'll correct it through the left and you don't want to be pointing at that wall, I'll tell you that for nout.
So what I was doing was sort of easing on the brakes as I ease on the steering into the right so that everything is stable, because a stable car is a car that's ready to change direction and go left. So you've done that entry phase, you've scrubbed the speed off, now it's about a smooth yet fairly fast transition into the left. I was braking all the way to the apex point of the left. Of course, the hard braking happens here, and then the rest of it is just gentler, easier braking, more about loading up the front of the car than actually slowing it down. So this gives you the front end to make that transition. Of course, if you're finding that the rear is sliding, you may be better off getting your braking done earlier and then not coasting, but being easier, more gentle on the brakes through that sequence. And if you're finding that the rear is too planted, that goes the other way. Go in harder, brake harder, trail brake more aggressively, and have the weight transfer towards the front. As you're easing off the brake and you've got your maximum amount of left lock on, that's when you start unwinding the steering wheel, feeding on the power, and making sure you get the drive down the straight. Once again, it's about driving down the straight, not washing wide and driving around the corner, but getting that turning done so you can power through the start-finish line. And that is a lap of the Goodwood Motor Circuit. You've seen the track map and my detailed thoughts about each turn individually. Now,
I'll give you some live commentary and a track guide of Goodwood Motor Circuit on this beautiful sunny day. Cross the line, coming into turn 1. Ease on the brakes is not a stamp, because you want to settle the car through this long right, getting that curve, letting it wash, and getting this curve again. I was flat out all the way from that middle curve. It's about just being smooth and carrying the speed. Here, this is a flat out right kink for me, but build up to that. It might not be flat out for you. It took me a few laps. Now we're coming up to this sort of chicane. I'm braking and pointing out at the outside there to have a swing at this right. But I want to keep it to the right so that I can fire at this left. It falls off a lot on exit here, so you might think you're going to make it and then you wash wide. So be very careful of that. I had a bit of a moment there earlier. This corner, the priority is the exit. Don't use all of the exit out to that curve back there, because you'll end up falling short here. Thank you. Nice gentleman. And here I'm braking at the 150, and the key here is I'm braking, I'm going down into fourth, and now as I ease off the brake, I'm winding on the steering and just teasing it into the right, nice and smooth. If you stab the wheel at any stage there, you'll slide. Chicane, don't do what I did there and induce a slide through the right, because then you'll have to correct it through the left and it will be slow, like that was.
and if you've got any questions, watch the video again. If you still don't get it, drop me a comment. If you want to see a video about the techniques I use when I get to any new track, press here, and please like, subscribe and comment. Let me know what you want to see next.